Hello, thank you so much for showing up. You know, we wanted to add some intellectual gravity to the fair, and it's great that you want some input, and we try to make this entertaining, because Duchamp surely was, and that is sometimes being forgotten. I'm very fortunate that I will not be speaking in a monologue, but I have two great people here. We don't plan this as a Q&A, but you know, it's rather talking about our joint passion for Marcel Duchamp in the context of his Readymades and the 100-year anniversary of his Readymade. So if I may start with Anne-Marie Bonnet. She's been a professor at the professor of art history at the University of Bonn since the 1990s. She's actually written her dissertation on 13th century epic illustrations, and now has a big book out after writing about the German Renaissance, about Dürer and the birth of the nude, so to speak. And she's also positioned herself squarely outside of the ivory tower of academics by being involved with museums, among them the museum in Dresden. I think very early on in your 20s, you already worked for a museum in Ludwigshafen, and you've also been teaching at the University of Taipei in Taiwan. Mathieu Mercier would basically be the counterpart in the art world by also being at the intersection or the crossroads of many different areas and fields. You are here because you've won the Marcel Duchamp Prize in 2003. You've shown at various museums, among them the Musée d'Art Contemporain in Paris, in Nuremberg, the museum, and you have a show upcoming in St. Gallen on the 23rd of August. So for those that stick around longer than Art Basel lasts, and you're here for another 3 months, make sure to come and visit his show and don't miss the opening. You've been dealing with the object a lot. You are represented here by Mehdi Chouakri, a great gallery from Berlin. I think it's booth N17.
Thank you.
Yes, so come and check out his work there for sure. There are objects on display, and objects is what we want to talk about. We briefly thought about just coming from the big trajectory of Marcel Duchamp himself. There are people that say the term ready-made should only be applied to Duchamp's ready-mades, which he started creating basically in 1913. So we are celebrating a 100-year anniversary of the ready-made, the single most influential idea coming out of modern art besides abstraction, I would like to argue, from an artist. In 1913, Duchamp created his bicycle wheel. He actually mounted a wheel on a stool. In 1914, at the BHV, the Bazaar Hotel de Ville, he bought a bottle dryer. So that was basically the first unaltered object that was created in 1914. And in a letter to his sister in 1915, early 1915, he first used the term ready-made. So we are smack in the middle of the 100-year anniversary. And just to come up with a question, Anne-Marie, taking notes, are artists nowadays who delve into the practice of ready-mades, now that they are no longer an iconoclastic object, but an iconic object, are they dumb?
Yes. No, of course not. Artists are never dumb. But I was just thinking, you said it's an iconic moment, and it was I was speaking with a friend just earlier, and I was thinking it was really a paradigm shift, this ready-made idea, and I was trying to think, is there any displacement of signification or paradigm shift of that quality able anymore nowadays? Because it was a change between the idea of what is art, what is not art, what is not real. And we are in a time in which what is real, what is art, is all, again, very much moving. And my point was, what could be, in that quality of déplacement, of signification, would something like that be possible today?
It's no longer possible.
You see? I'm not sure. Let's talk about it. Mathieu, you're not dumb, sorry.
Yeah, no, but I think, in fact, we are doing, in a way, a big mistake in art history, considering that the first art pieces were drawing in the caves, for example. And I think the first art piece was obviously a natural ready-made. And that means men, before to make such a strong representation with a drawing, probably found things and had a relationship to them like we do with the Readymade, for example, except they were natural things and they went back to the natural fields, so we don't have proof of that. But I'm pretty sure that in fact man had collected natural stones or wood or whatever, and had exactly the same meaning with them that we have with art today. So if we think that way, they were a practice of ready-made for probably 20,000 years. Marcel Duchamp just rediscovered this, but it was, for me, a practice from a much long time before.
But then Duchamp wanted to get away from taste and aesthetics with his ready-mades. He picked them by chance, and it's a difference between the objet trouvé of the surrealists that was picked for reasons of beauty, and maybe what you said thousands of years ago, that artists picked certain objects, but Duchamp tried to get, by picking an object, tried to get away precisely from aesthetics and taste.
Yeah, I don't think it was true, actually.
Okay.
That's what he said, because he wanted to have less whatever he was doing. So he told himself that we don't have to do too many ready-made. So it was the way to cool down the things. But if we look at the urinal as an object, even as an erotic object, or if you look at the bottle rack as a piece of a mechanic part, knowing how Duchamp was interested into diagrams and erotism, there's obviously a link between the shape you see and his interest in general.
I would agree also to you that that the objects have a very special aesthetic and they are very sexy. But I would also agree to what you said. I think the difference between what you think about this 20,000 years ago ready-made, it was about giving to an object of nature a signification, whatever signification, sentimental. But the ready-made is interesting because it's not only the object, but it's what the object makes. Because the object doesn't work as an object, but because it's put into a certain place. It is a transformation. Mm-hmm. It's not about, that is also, that's something else. And you're also right, artistry is totally wrong. And remember, we made that symposium on Duchamp, because I said, what could artistry learn from Duchamp? If we took Duchamp serious and the ready-made serious, that would be the end of art as we knew it. So what did artistry do? They made from Duchamp, they pasteurized him, domesticized him, and made Duchampism and lots of explanations. And I think Duchamp himself fall back to it. But the ready-made taken serious would be the end of artistry, of an intelligent one. Maybe artistry in our dump, not the artist.
I said our artist dumb in the beginning because Duchamp was always, is it un peintre or une peintre? Un peintre, yeah? Bête comme un peintre. He always was referring to that quote. What you were saying and you were hinting at is the intricacy of the ready-mades, which are certainly not only based on chance. You mentioned, the erotic potential of the ready-mades and how they also are being seen as, in his context of his work, are also, you see many parallels to other objects that he actually created by hand. The one thing, though, and I would want to hear your opinion on that, is that I think it was about 5 years ago that the BBC was asking what is the most influential artwork of the 20th century. And they were asking 500 art experts internationally, and Fountain, that you already mentioned, came up on top, surpassing the Demoiselles d'Avignon, surpassing Matisse, surpassing even Warhol. They came in second, third, and fourth. So the use of the term ready-made today has been, is a shorthand for anything can be art. Is the definition of, anything can be elevated to the status of art. But we know that Duchamp never gave that definition. He never defined the ready-made as being art.
That's what I said. It's not about the object, but it's about what the object makes. It is, as we know, institutional critique. It was about this museum. That's why I find it particularly perverse or funny that at a place which is especially difficult for institutional critique and art fair to speak about this piece. Because I think that this ready-made and this gesture thing from Duchamp was mainly about how could the artist keep control over the artwork. Because in modern time, so-called autonomous artist, probably the artist loses any control. As soon as the work leaves the studio, he loses control. Come the critic, the collector, whoever. And by installing this, he decides even what the space would be, who gives importance to his objects, he is a total, he's the one who decides about the space, about everything. It's keeping control about what you do. And this is the fantastic idea. It's not about the object as much, but what the object makes, the power of the object, and keeping control. And he's the one who keeps control. And so he would be very amused to see us sitting here talking about his Readymade on an institution which is very special.
I think he had the great intuition that the Readymade would still be effective as a provocation even 100 years after, because as the categories to define art would stay painting or sculpture, in each art lover's life, the Readymade would be a provocation in your own experience. So it would be still effective because, except if you have a background with art history and you're born in a family who collects or whatever, and you're immediately used to that aspect, we always define art as painting or sculpture. So an object, unused, still had it is in a store, would disturb anyone who see it for the first time.
But it's what you said, keeping in control, and the many layers. I think Thierry de Duve in recent edition of Art Forum said that the fountain is an onion. You can peel away meaning, you can add meaning to it, and it's still, we haven't come to the source of it all, which I think is also a hunt that is futile, because there cannot be only one explanation. If Duchamp teaches us one thing, that there's no causality, that you cannot. Duchamp is not a riddle to be solved in a way, and his ideas about the ready-made objects that came into being in the 1910s, they had to do with thinking about non-Euclidean geometry, about the fourth dimension, about taste, humor, indifference, chance, shadows actually, and also the idea of a replica and gray matter. Duchamp created ready-mades the moment that he was at the top of his game painting. He created great paintings up until 1912, 1913, when the first ready-mades came into being. And he didn't like painting anymore because it was a dead-end street for him. As he said, anything had already been done in painting, which of course isn't true in a way, but was his way out to no longer be only a painter and do something that is basically something in between. And he wanted to get away from the hand that creates. And he disliked artists that were getting high on the smell of their oil paint in their studio. So he wanted to get this into a very much more mechanical forms of what it is that he stood for.
I don't think so. I think not about the mechanical form. It's upon the idea, the concept. I think none of the original ready-mades we have. He didn't take any attention of them. It was thrown away. We don't have any original one.
Except for the comb.
Yeah, for the comb, yeah. But I think maybe it would be stronger if you wouldn't have done with Arturo Schwarz the edition. The hovering idea of the ready-made would be much more powerful.
I think it's still in a way.
It's
still because it's exactly how the religion works. We don't have the original, so it's why it's an icon.
Yeah, okay.
It would not be an icon if we would have keep the first ones.
But I think to explain what it is, what you're referring to is that all of the original ready-mades, that Duchamp actually in the 1910s and never really intended to show. They were in a studio. They were shown once at a small gallery. As you know, the fountain was rejected where it was supposed to be shown. That was part of the game. And then they were lost. Even the second or third edition that he then did as one object was lost. And in the 1960s, Duchamp got took a lot of heat from people in the art world because he agreed to have an edition of the ready-mades done by a Milanese art dealer called by the name of Arturo Schwarz. So all the fountains and the bottle dryers and the coat racks that we see today in museums are from that edition of 1964, 1965, and there is a big rejection by Duchampians, like why did he finally sell out? As you know, Duchamp did a lot of things all by himself. He got his first retrospective when he was already older than 70 years old. No artist today, has that chance to grow that much by himself or herself in his studio or her studio. So what do you? I mean, what you just said. Are you critical of that edition?
I am. I think after the Readymade, it should really have stopped. Also, the whole late thing, all the étant donné, all that stuff. The best thing was really this, and he should really have only played chess. And nothing left of it. That would have been really radical. Because finally he turned back doing things, doing objects, fetishistic stuff. He fell back himself into all what he was denying before. So I prefer to think him until 1914, and nothing is left of it besides the comb. It's much better. That would be really radical.
Do you think that? Do you feel the same? You apparently don't feel the same way about the edition of 1964.
No, it's. And first, they were not ready-made. They were completely redone.
Multiples.
Yeah, no.
Spirit,
they're multiples, but they're not ready-made at all. They were built. They are not. You didn't buy them in the stores. The vinyl was completely molded. Yeah. It was. So it's an image. So that's saying it's another trick, but.
To me, I would argue that Duchamp in the 60s, when he got all that attention from Jasper Jones, from Robert Rauschenberg, from all the pop artists that embraced him and him being in New York and him building a bridge between the avant-gardes of Europe and the United States, that he realized in 1964 that the ready-mades from 50 years ago had already lost their iconoclastic status and they had turned into icons. So he was fine of doing an edition. And there is Max Ernst. I mean, Max Ernst was close to Marcel Duchamp. He was also in New York, obviously. Max Ernst asked Duchamp about the ready-mades, if I can quote from the book that I all want you to buy afterwards. Max Ernst asked Duchamp, I asked myself, their place was now center stage in the discourse about modern art. Max Ernst's take on the influx of replicas of the ready-mades came close to what his friend had in mind. Now I'm quoting Max Ernst. I asked myself if it wasn't a new attempt to throw public opinion, to deceive his admirers, to encourage his imitators by his bad example, etc. When I asked him, he answered laughingly, yes, it was all of that. I mean, that's Duchamp being elusive as always, but at the same time, he allowed for that explanation.
He invented himself. He was his own art historian. He made the boîte en valise. He was his best artist, and he put a lot of köder. Bait for art historian with all the texts he wrote and all the elusive thing. It's really in Germany they give them Affen Zucker, and he gave the monkeys lots of sugar. But it was about turning tables. Keeping the control, because he gave us so much. Yeah, chess player, giving so much bait that there have been so much ink on it, and not surprisingly, 90% men in art history. Duchamp's a very manly subject.
Although he was a woman also, as
he was a womanizer, yeah, and a big womanizer.
A womanizer, no, a woman.
A woman, yeah, at the end.
Rose de la Vie.
Okay, yeah. But it's very interesting how this system of keeping control, giving signification, and he really fueled it very much. And that I like, and it still works. The machine still works. Oh? We still grind our chocolate ourselves. Not me, the man.
Just coming because I mean you said, and Mathieu, I want to get back to because you mentioned the box. If the only original ready-made that we have in the Philadelphia Museum of Art is a comb, a very unassuming comb that was a dog comb or a cattle comb that Duchamp bought in 1916 in New York. That's what he said, at least. And then there was this edition of the comb in the 1964-1965 edition. And when you yourself make the effort, because you said, Mathieu, that they were not ready-made objects, the edition, but they were actually crafted by Arturo Schwarz based on the original photographs of the lost ready-mades. Duchamp was having his fun with that edition too, because if you're really, if you're not only reading up on art history, but you look at the object and you do material research, the thing that you realize is that the original comb in the Philadelphia Museum has actually 2 teeth less than the edition of 1964. So there's a difference that is not apparent to the eye right away, but when you count, I think it's 55 teeth versus 57 teeth. And then you look at Duchamp's own notes, and there's a note from 1913, even before he created the comb, or even before he signed the comb as a ready-made, saying, count combs by the number of their teeth. You know, it's like he's giving you that 50 years prior that you should check the number of the teeth. You know, it's no surprise. Duchamp is not a trap, but he's somebody who can really inspire you. That you know, from André Breton to Thomas Hirschhorn, you know, they were referring to Marcel Duchamp as the most intelligent artist of the 20th century, because precisely he's playing these games. And as you said, he's not losing control, because he's not, you know, although they are being presented in museums, he takes as much control of them as possible. And I think that is something that artists today can learn, while the ready-made idea is kind of, you'd have to start playing your own game. Having to start playing your own game, because I did a monologue long enough, you mentioned the box. Duchamp created, you know, miniature versions of his artworks and his ready-mades, like of his 100 most important works, and he put them all in a little box that people could carry around. It's now, of course, a sought-after collector's item. Mathieu, you created an edition from Duchamp's edition of the box that will be available soon for everyone to buy and purchase.
Yeah, I'm still working on it. It's since 4 years now that I'm working on it. It's a printed version of the box in a valise. That means it's a reinterpretation in a way, but the box is complete, and so you have all the document inside. Because I realized that as Marcel Duchamp was designing his life as a mystery, the box in a valise, everybody knew it, but nobody knows exactly what it is inside. So I started to work about this idea to have it printed like a book. So all my work was to interpret things, to have it simply produced, for it at the end to be sold for the price of a beautiful book. So here you have the picture of the second prototype, which is not perfect, but which gives you an idea about the final result, which is very close to the original one.
And that will sell for about 200 euros?
Less. I hope less, yeah.
Great.
120 something.
Mm-hmm. Would you ask, what were the trigger or the errors to do this for you? To make a replica of this museum? What were for you, the artistic trigger for it, the interest?
Their interest was simply that it was an iconic object that nobody knew really, because they're all more or less in museums and they're all always open that way. But if you look at here, you understand that you have printed sheets which are inside the box, but they are all folded here. So you need really to manipulate.
But I know, how much box did you do?
About 300.
300. And in each one there is one special drawing. So
that was only
that's the first 21.
The deluxe,
yeah.
but even the first 21. And until now, nobody ever has made a research what they all were. Put them together, I think. And this was also to keep control, because you never know what is in the box of the next one. Mm-hmm. Oh? And have you done this too? Is there something that is there one dimension in your box which will still be open, that you won't know what's really? Or is it absolutely now transparent?
Is there any mystery? No, it's fully transparent. There's just one thing: is the glissière, the piece up on the right on a circle, which was actually only on the 21st version, and because Duchamp had a problem with the printed at that time on plastic, and it was like wavy, and he could not get it back to the box, so he just moved it out on all the other editions. Now, as it is not a problem anymore to print on this kind of transparent plastic, I decided to put it back with the advice of the family.
Does that not undermine the ready-made idea?
Sorry?
Does that not undermine the ready-made? We are here because of the ready-made. Does this not undermine or pervert the ready-made idea?
It has nothing to do with the ready-made.
You reproduce ready-mades. There are ready-mades in it. So ready-made becomes a gadget, but does not ready-made become a gadget?
They are miniature already on the original ones.
Yeah, but if you do it like this, does it not turn into a gadget?
No, it's turning into something that nobody knows, and everybody could get it to know exactly what it's in. which is like it doesn't break the box in itself. It's not an art piece. It's an interpretation. So it's
it's a good way to spend your money for the Prix Marcel Duchamp on this particular object. Of the research that goes into it, and I'm sure it must have been hard to get the permission of the estate for this.
Yeah, no, but they helped me a lot. They liked the idea. Of course, I couldn't have done that myself. They gave me access to an original box first and to original documents to work on it.
I want to get back to something because you said let's focus on the Readymade, but at the same time, you said you were working on this already for 4 years and it might come out the next year. It's interesting because we're talking in the context of an art fair here that Duchamp already in the 1960s coined the term quick art. You know, he was always going up against dealers and galleries and whatnot. At the same time, of course, he dealt with Piccabias, he dealt with Brancusis. Whoever bought a Brancusi from Duchamp in the 1920s, has made a good deal considering his prices now. But Duchamp was complaining in the 60s about quick art, that is only being produced for consumption, and I think it's good to take time and create things that are somewhat positioned outside of. I mean, this thing comes in at a very low price for people to be able to take home not an artwork by Duchamp, but something that is an homage to Duchamp and makes it possible for people to get the idea of what the box is. How do you think his take on and especially with the Readymades, they were also created apart from any sort of being able to sell them off. Even the edition didn't really sell in the very beginning in the 60s and in the early 60s. What is your take on Duchamp as a dealer and Duchamp going up against the art market?
This is, of course, he knew what he was talking about because he was a big dealer. No? That's why I say why it's interesting to be here. He had the ambivalence of himself. But just to go shortly back to what you said, you speak about taking time, taking 4 years to do it. And just earlier you said it was about doing work which has nothing to do with handicraft. No? And do you know the work of John Roberts, The Intangibility of Forms? It's a text about, just came out last year, about the ready-made and the part of handicraft. And about the transformation of the concept of art until what just said, it said that you should go away from objects and art as a currency. And I think ready-made has become a currency in the sense of just that. No? Because it's not about the thing, but about the dynamics it creates. And this is interesting. Because, and the dynamics it's creating, or it's working again, because he was exactly two things. He was an art dealer and an institutional critique artist. And that is the mystery, the one you can't get, you can't transform, you can make objects with. And this is what I think makes it interesting for me more. The ambivalence, him knowing what he's doing, being an art dealer and working against the art system. Like me, I spend teaching my time against the art system. Then I sit here and talk about Duchamp on the art fair. Am I perverse? I'm a liar?
You always refer to yourself not as an art historian, but as an artistarian.
Art historian, art hysterico, yeah.
So
it's
I
true.
think we see some of that side right here now.
Today, okay.
Yes. But do you want to add to that, or otherwise I would like to go back probably and also then maybe coming back to the original idea of the Readymade. You talked about the paradigmatic shift that the Readymade as an iconoclastic object that has to be, with changing the context of how objects are being seen, it opened up a whole different ballgame for art history. Of course, if we contextualize the Readymade, there are various stories. In 1912, there was an aeroplane show in Paris that Léger and Brancusi again visited together with Duchamp, and they stopped in front of a propeller, and it was Duchamp who said, or it was Brancusi or Léger, who was it? Duchamp. It was Duchamp, of course. Okay, then it was Duchamp who said, art is done with. Can anybody create anything as beautiful as this propeller? So here we are again, it would bring back the aesthetics that he denied when we were talking about the ready-mades. That's one thing, but also Duchamp was in Munich in 1912, fleeing Paris for many reasons, and there he saw that mass-produced objects were shown in a museum context with the German museum, where you also had bicycles on display. And another thing was that, you know, before when he signed a urinal in 1917, 2 years prior, somebody just found out with research at the museum outside of New York, urinals were already presented as and with people writing in the catalog that they should have the same status as works of art. So at this very moment in time, there was already at least the hint of a discussion about allowing mass-produced objects to gain the status of art. The definition that Duchamp himself, of course, denied the ready-mades, being one step ahead.
Okay, this goes back to the German idea of Kunsthandwerkmuseum and the arts and craft idea. But listening to this, I would like to know, so the context of his re-situation or rethinking the object was in that time. Could the ready-made be nowadays in the time of, say, 3D printer, where everybody will be able to print everything in 3D? So what will creativity be, and what would Duchamp think about, like with the propeller? What would aesthetic become? What becomes aesthetic then? If everything, and I think the ready-made is then good because you can't, the idea of ready-made, you can't do the 3D printer, but you can do the urinal, you can do the valise, everything in the 3D printer. Maybe you should have waited a few bit longer and let the 3D printer do the valise. That would have been Duchampish or not? The machine doing it. What do you think? Do it through the 3D? Do you think it would be possible once to do the whole Duchamp stuff through the 3D printer?
I don't know if there's any interest to do that.
That would be. You just said earlier. He said with Duchamp, it was about not doing anything with your hand, just with your rethinking. So this would be a very interesting point.
Would be no hand involved.
It doesn't change the fact that art is the first mental projection before to be an object. So, maybe we have to redefine really what is the ready-made, because I mean there's many.
You're a very romantic person, I see. You're more romantic than me as an art historian.
No,
That's
probably
lovely.
not.
I mean, maybe before we open this up for possible questions from the audience, I would like to just go back to one point in regard to a show that he actually did, and in regard to the point you were making to context. You know, the first real ready-made was created in 1914, the unaltered object, by Duchamp going to the Basel Hotel de Ville in Paris and buying the bottle dryer. You know, it's something that peasants or wine peasants were using to dry bottles. You know all this, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here or be interested. He bought this in 1914, and now, of course, the edition of it is in the Centre Pompidou. And I think that the BHV, the Basel Hotel de Ville, approached you to bring back the Centre Pompidou the signed object to the basement of the store.
It's the opposite. They were thinking about doing it. Mm-hmm. They had the project to bring back the signed bottle rack in the store. But it was like way too expensive in insurance and to secure the room where they wanted to put it to be reasonable. So I proposed them, instead of bringing back an icon into the store, more to think about how the way to work with the object, both purchased in the store, were now in any mind of any artist. So many artists are working in stores, getting things to build their piece. So I created a show with actually Bernard Marcadet, who is an art historian who did a great biography about Duchamp. And we did together a small show in the store, but with invited artists who did more or less ready-made. Sometimes they're more collage, but using objects that we were directly from the store.
Until the 70s, you could get exactly those bottle racks. We had one in our Wohngemeinschaft in Heidelberg. Now they are in plastic. They don't exist anymore. But until the 70s, we had two.
Yeah, I bought one in 1990 there and took it to the Centre Pompidou.
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe now the question from your side.
Yeah, just one thing, because I also want you, the Stampa has the book, if you're interested. And I just wanted to, because we talked about chance, and chance sometimes translates into luck. And I just wanted to read to you, because it's so sweet. And a little entry on luck in the book. You find it under L, of course, where else? And it's Duchamp talking about luck. Duchamp not only thought of luck as the essential component for any artist's career, but also considered himself a very lucky man. Quote, "I have had an absolutely wonderful life, an intensive lust for life. I had luck, fantastic luck. Not a day without eating, and I have never been rich either. Everything turned out well." So that should be a nice quote for the art fair. So when asked what it was that had satisfied him the most in his life, he replied, "First, having been lucky." So if we learned that today, we've learned a lot about Duchamp, and maybe that that if that falls right into your heart, it sometimes makes you happy when you think about it during the day. But that should not be the final statement. If there are questions, we got Mathieu Mercier here and Anne-Marie Bonnet, who are happy to answer any weird questions or anything from the top of your head that might be of interest. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Emily Santangelo, and my question is for the professor. I had the good fortune of knowing the artist Armand, who was greatly influenced and a friend of Duchamp. When you speak of the Readymade, and I think of Armand, how do you feel that he took the Readymade and made accumulations and his own statement through showing them as a mass, or in his poubelles, if you will? How do you feel as far as Duchamp's single urinal as opposed to how Armand took it as the Readymade in an accumulation?
I think he made something very nice, but it was a romantic thing. He turned it back into an art object, which is very lovely. But the point was to change the way to approach art on other categories, and he returned it into something aesthetic, poetic, melancholic, romantic. It's a beautiful work of art, but the Readymade was just exactly, again, this category. He introduced other categories of romanticism, poetic. But it's, from my point, it's not, the radicality is to re-bring another quality of art. And Armand is beautiful, but it works perfectly with traditional categories, like aesthetic, composition, poetic, beautiful. But it turns him back, in my eyes.
And it has nothing to do with Readymade, in fact. The Readymade is a production of the industry, which is purchased in the store and shown as an artwork without being used for what it was supposed to. So if we can't have a second-hand Readymade in a way. An object which has already been used has its own history, and it's already too romantic to be a Readymade. So the Readymade is really a collective production in a capitalist society, and it can't be signed or designed or made by hand by somebody else before. And for example, it's quite funny to see that we define, of course, all Duchamp's pieces with objects as Readymades, but we never talk that way, for example, with the saddle and the handlebar from the bike of Picasso, for example, because it represents something. The Readymades cannot represent anything else than itself. So it's just a position in society. It's not a use of the object in itself.
May I have an example for a use of the Readymade in a very interesting contemporary way. I was last week in Budapest because there were the exams of the curatorial students, and one group of curatorial students made has exam work a fictitious Guggenheim Budapest. And the interesting point in that, where I speak of it, is though they made a fictitious. When you enter the Guggenheim Budapest, there is the first room, is a room for institutional critique. And the institutional critique is the chapel. And the chapel is a concrete square with a urinal, a black square, and a palette. And I found that very interesting. That these young, in their 20s, coming from another world of art, Hungary is not yet, it's a difficult situation, and think about making a critique of a capitalistic museum system. They make a chapel, and what they put in it? The urinal, the black square, and a palette. And I have not yet got all the mise en abîme which is in it, but I found this a very good point, which Marcel would have loved, because it's really thinking about what objects do, what is done by objects, what is the dynamics, the currency, the agency of objects. It's about the agency of the ready-made. And this is a very clever work for this. And this is maybe the most interesting, which Armand in his generation could not get. I think that's what I mean. The agency of the ready-made is what interests me. And in that work of the students in Budapest, it's very strong at work in my eyes.
Just to add one sentence to that, I think when it comes to, because the art newspaper, they came knocking and were asking about our idea of the ready-made and who are the artists that are dealing with it in a sort of smart, intellectual way that, kind of evolves from Duchamp. So of course it would be you, Mathieu, but also, Christian Markley comes to mind. He talks about it. He was a DJ before, and he talks about the use of the ready-made, remixing the ready-made. And that's what he does. I mean, it's on a completely different level. It's with, found footage somewhat, but I think it's taking it one step further, which is interesting. But we can leave that open. Any more questions in this regard? Yes, please. There will be a mic handed to you.
Yes, I'm Margriet Schavenmakers, curator at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. Thank you for this very intriguing dialogue, which for me hovers between this institutionalism and embracing that and making that also into something pure and authentic. Whereas on the other hand, you also showed that, of course, Marcel Duchamp was not a purist himself and also played with the market. And you used the L for luck, defining in your dictionary. But what I missed is also the relationship to language. And I think that Duchamp was very much intrigued by language. And I remember a story reading in one of Tom Crowe's books where he speaks about Duchamp in an airplane and looking down. And every city, he gives new names to every city he sees down below. And this is also the idea of a ready-made, and then by claiming it, by just a speech act, a performative speech act, like this is art because I say so, which of course Arthur Dento also referred to, is of course a different, more conceptual interpretation of the ready-made. And I was wondering if you could both, because I didn't hear anything on this more conceptual linguistic interpretation.
If you bring up something actually that we forgot to mention. I mean, Duchamp gave the ready-mades titles, and that edit, he said it adds like another color. It's like on a verbal language. But there's an entry on language, of course, in the book, and Duchamp referred to language as a great enemy and an era of humanity, and because he always thought that language, art. If we try to describe art with a language, art is not in need of translation. He was very, he's very doubtful. I mean, doubt is another very important concept for him of language and what meaning language can carry. The only thing that he took pleasure in, what you're describing is great, of toying with language. That's why he was so much into puns, of what language can do and the many layers that language can have in many different languages. He himself traveling between many languages in his lifetime. And so the only format that, of course, the surrealists themselves were toying with is he always loved the dictionary because it pretended to be so clear-cut of defining what something means. And he took, he wanted to create his own dictionary by cutting out words and trying to, by coming up with funny systems, and that also had to do with chance. But in terms of language, the only way I think language could come alive for him is when he started toying with it. When he took us to the very outskirts of what language is capable of, and that's why he was a great person in regard to puns, which were so important to the titles of his works, adding another layer, as well as for the fun that he was having when he was speaking or writing things down.
Maybe you remember that Duchamp said titles are like perfume. And that is perfect because it doesn't work with the cognition, but with the smell, the sense, and senses, it's very different significations. Sensuous, intellectual, that's it. I love that idea, the title like perfume.
Yes, of course.
And he loves parfum, as you know. Air de Paris and all that stuff.
Yes. All right. There's another question. Yes?
Yeah, okay. Tim Roth, art historian. I have a question with regards to this beginning promotion by Arturo Schwarz and guys like that in the 1960s. Well, I'm not so familiar with the work of Duchamp, but it was quite important also for people like Man Ray, also with setting up editions and things like that. And my idea from an art historical point of view is, if we refer to the art history, is it referring more to that period or really to the very beginning? So if I look to Man Ray, a lot of things, well, he wrote his autobiography in the 1960s, and so the question is how we can really distinguish between the different phenomena and how far, well, this art history was written in the 1960s, not in the 1910s.
Maybe the problem always is, as an art historian, we try to first to reconstruct, but how can I reconstruct the mentality of the 20s, the 30s, the 50s? It's very, but I remember the 70s, and I definitely know it was different. And as you know, different art market was created for democracy, and now we are here. So one point, what was already made in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, we should do for each period a known time. But I can't reconstruct history. I can't just Thomas said it earlier, you know, what it was for Duchamp himself. Duchamp in the 60s and Duchamp in the 50s, 1950s. And shortly to Man Ray, you know, I think one thing with this Readymade is that he came into the smell of surrealistic objects, and he worked with ready objects as well. Yeah. And I think the agency of the Readymade at the beginning was more something about signification, transformation of systems, and then it becomes erotic, pervert, and whatever you want. So it's also something, and Breton, what the big, it's a crime of Breton, what he did with Duchamp, for instance.
I would say that, you know, except for his quick success with the nude descending a staircase at the Armory show, when he was actually better known in the United States than Picasso at that very moment in time, you know, he went right, and that's what he said, you know, in the Creative Act. The thing that he told younger artists was, the great artists of tomorrow will go underground. Because Duchamp had been underground until he was being, you know, interviewed. All of his interviews and what he says about his work, 80% of it comes from an older man from the 70s until his 80s, you know, looking back on his work. That's why it's so important to read the early interviews, and especially read the letters, and read his own notes on the idea of the ready-mades, to not only see it reflected throughout half a century, but really delve into it and look at the original sources. And I do think that sometimes this is dealt with in a very negligent way when it comes to art historical writing.
Yeah, there's a simple fact, when he did them, nobody cared. So.
Right, I guess we would close up shop unless there's another urgent question. No, oh no, I'm being told no.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
thank you for your patience.
Thank you for being here and sticking around. I hope it was good for you to be here, and thanks for spending time with us.